Elizabeth, how are you?
I'm doing quite well. How about yourself?
Excellent. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, and we'll get going.
Great. Well, I'm Elizabeth Jonasson. I'm the public affairs representative for Westlands Water
Uh-huh.
District. We are a water district, primarily ag water district, on the western side of Fresno and Kings County.
Right. So it looks like Westlands got started around 1944, and a bunch of guys got together and talked, looks like 10 years about it. Some big names. I mean, you got Jack O'Neill, Russell Giffen, Frank Diener. I mean, those are big guys.
Yep.
So they started this.
Yeah, some of those families are still farming in the district to this day.
Yeah.
Farming on the west side of Fresno and Kings County has been there for a couple hundred years,
Right.
since before California was even a state. And a lot of that farming happened with groundwater,
Right.
because the area doesn't have naturally surface water.
Yeah.
And so Westland started actually as a way of preventing groundwater overpumping by trying to secure surface water supplies.
Right.
And so it wasn't until 1952 there was an election of the landowners in the area. And actually last year we celebrated our 70th anniversary.
Yeah, that's a long time. How many people work for you?
Um,
Well, they contract, and you have all kind of, yeah.
Yeah. So over 100 people. Most of the people are in the maintenance. So we have an entirely buried underground distribution system.
Yeah, I saw that.
And so that's miles and miles of pipe,
Yeah.
over 1,000.
Right.
And so that means that when there's something that needs to happen, we need to get people in there to repair.
Right. Yeah, you've got, it looks like you have like 1,000, like it said 1,000 miles
Mm-hmm.
of underground piping.
Yep.
How long did that all take?
So I don't know the exact timeline of the construction, but over a span of a few years, that distribution system was.
Yeah. It must have cost a lot too.
Actually, I don't think it costed that much.
Is that right?
But what is interesting, though, is that it's all gravity. And so the engineers back in the day were able to very precisely engineer the entire system to be gravity fed.
I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a lot of cost. There's no, yeah.
But
That's
in
good.
the end, with the price of water and how scarce that resource and buried underground, and as far as we know, we're one of the only ones, if not the only irrigation district that has so from the canal to the field, the water doesn't see the light of day.
Right.
And so there's no evaporation,
Yeah.
no loss for seepage or anything like that.
Yeah.
And so we're really from the get-go very sustainable.
Yeah, because there's a big evaporation on standing water, so they don't want to do that. Yeah, that's a good thing. And that took you. See, you started in 1952, and they petitioned, I guess, the Fresno County Board of Supervisors, became Westland Water District, and now the sloughs. They're fed. The slough is the Mendota Slough. It's fed from Kings River and San Joaquin, something like that.
So our water comes from the Central Valley Project.
Yeah, basically, yeah. That's a big project.
Mm-hmm.
The water, yeah, because I was reading here, and they take water from the Mendota, I guess, and San Joaquin, and get it through to you. And then, so do you buy it from the Bureau of Reclamation? How does that work?
So Westlands is a contractor.
Okay.
So we have a contract with the Bureau of Reclamation for the CVP water.
Right.
And but we do sometimes, more often now than not, buy water, supplemental water,
Right.
which is water from different areas that people that have water to sell, districts that have water to sell, and we bring it down to the users in the district.
Yeah.
That's especially important in years like this. This past year, the water year is a little different than the calendar year, but this past water year when we got a 0% allocation, so 0% of the contract,
Right.
zero water from federal water. Same thing with the previous year, and so the way that we get water for the crops on our fields, or our farmers get the water for the crops in the fields, is by purchasing water from external sources or groundwater.
Right. So, yeah, because it said that you guys cover 600,000 acres, I guess. Is that correct?
So that's the size of the district, not all of those.
Yeah. Now, where is your district? Where is everything located so people can understand California?
Just
Central Valley.
roughly, goes about as north around Mendota area,
Uh-huh.
the I-5 south. Well, there's little parts northern than Mendota, but south to Kettleman City, that In-N-Out burger that's right there
Yeah.
at the southern terminus, parts of the Naval Air Base, and all the way back up.
That's a lot of territory you cover and everything. So you have people out there, everything doing maintenance and everything, huh? Yeah, because I was looking, and it's like we talked about. It's really complicated because there's water rights and there's pumping and everything. Of course, you want to do less pumping, right? Because it's better for the soil and everything. It's easier for you, right?
Well, since the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, but actually since we were talking at the beginning of the impetus behind actually forming the water district, growers understood that we needed to be sustainable.
Right.
And so groundwater, was a finite resource, is
Right.
a resource that we need to
Exactly.
maintain. And so they pursued a surface water contract with the idea that if they could get surface water, and ours comes all the way from Northern California, which is another interesting part, all the way down here, that we could conserve and pump less groundwater.
Right.
And so there's always that trade-off because you need water to grow whatever crop that you're
Sure.
growing. And we in the Central Valley truly are the breadbasket of the entire United States, but also provide a lot of crops to feed the rest of the world.
Right. Yeah, it's enormous. I was looking at, and they were talking. So at one time you were on your own, and then you combined
How so?
with another department, another district.
Broadview?
Yeah, or some. Yeah, yeah.
There were a couple different combinations. Westlands that increased the footprint that we currently have.
Yeah.
Currently, we're about, as you mentioned, the size of Rhode Island.
Is that right? That big?
Yep, a little smaller, but just for
Jeez.
comparative purposes.
Well, yeah. There's a lot of responsibility in that. Then now, how does your relationship with the farmers? How does that work?
So, in a couple different ways. So, we're primarily an ag water
Sure.
district, but we also have municipal and industrial users, and which are basically non-farming
Yeah.
uses. So, the farmers, they get a vote. Landowners, they get a vote on our board, so they get to run and be part of our board. We're governed by 9 board members.
Sure.
And so they get to vote and participate. They also, through purchase of water and through land-based charges, finance the activities of the district. And it gets a little more complicated than that, but just
Yeah.
for
Well, that's all right. I mean, get as complicated as you want or as less as you want. But so they overlook everything and all the decisions and everything. They have board meetings.
Yes,
Yeah.
we have board meetings. We do regular grower communication. As you can imagine, water information
Yeah.
is particularly important to them. So we try to keep them up to date as to what the water situation is looking like for the next year, what the current year is looking like, what our purchases for supplemental water are. But also there's some other reporting that has to be done. And so we're in communication with them to make sure that they're getting all the stuff in that they need to.
Yeah. It looks like it was West Plains Water District.
Yes.
Yeah, that you
Before
merged
Broadview.
with in 1965.
Yes.
So you were growing and kind of getting underneath it and
That's
everything.
a kind of a complicated story.
Yeah.
That was
Go ahead.
the part of legislation actually that required the merger there.
That's what I was reading. I guess the Bureau of Reclamation got involved and said you should do this, right? So you did it, of course. Yeah, that's the way to do it. Yeah, they're the Central Valley project is the biggest project ever, I guess, in the history of the United States, as far as I can see.
And there's also the State Water Project.
Okay,
And
what's
so,
what's the difference? Yeah,
The State Water Project is managed by the state of California. The Central Valley Project is a federal project. And so there's two different
Yeah.
water sources, different contracts.
That's what makes this complicated.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, because people think, oh, it's just, it's not. The canal run, I was looking at it, and it started breaking up into different names. And when it does something like that, there's different people controlling it in the same run of water.
Yep.
So you're dealing with all these different subsidiaries, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Other water districts too?
Yeah, other water districts can be contractors, and the whole system is rather complex. Some entities have water rights, some entities have contracts. So it's all a very complicated water system in California.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely. That's why I was loved talking to you and everything, because it's so complicated, and you can't make things complicated to the regular people like this. I mean, it is really complicated. How this all started, the ins and outs, federal, state. So at one time, I guess they were paying for the federal. Were they paying the feds back for the on the Central Valley Water?
Yeah, so we paid back for the construction of the project.
Is that paid for?
We have a repayment contract.
Yeah, repayment contract. Yeah, because I see it changed. It went. Well, does that mean they own it if they pay for it? I mean, you'd think so, right? This is where this is another complicated part of it, right?
To bring it back to your listeners, what I found fascinating joining Westlands Water District is really, truly the average person, because generally in day-to-day life you don't need to, knows where their water comes from.
Oh, yeah.
Where, people turn on the tap, but, do you know if it comes from the Colorado River? Do you know if it comes from the San Joaquin River? Do you know what, irrigation district you might be in? Those kinds of things. And I think just taking a step back, unless you're on a well or you're, in one of those areas where you're trying to really conserve because you're concerned about your groundwater, et cetera, most people don't really realize the complicated system that happens for that drop of water to get to your tap.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it goes through dams. There's like 33 dams or something like that.
On the Central Valley Project.
Yeah, on the Central Valley Project. And it's interesting because it stopped in like Mount Shasta. I was reading about it. They were supposed to go another 200 feet. And then they went, well, that's not, and they were debating about it. And then they said, well, this, and they got down to agreeing on like 30 feet or something like that, pretty close to that, and extending it. And then World War II hit, and it stopped everything. And ever since, it's been a very slow and gradual thing where they don't want to, expand. And I guess there was a new bill, some money coming in from the federal government or something. That they were going to do it.
Yeah, I think, the drought has affected not just California, but most of the western United States.
Right.
And so there have been funds set aside from federal government for addressing drought, and also from the state government and grants and the like. I think if I'm going to inject some optimism into this, is that there are a lot of ways that we can conserve water, that we can retain water, that we can get additional supplies of water. So there's a lot of know-how as to how to get there.
Right.
It's just, a lot of these projects take money and they take time, and things are changing.
Yeah, and there's a lot of debating about things get stopped, things get prolonged, and there's a lot to this. You can go on. It's like you said, it's federal and state. So they're talking to these people and they're talking to these people, and what it must. I mean, it just must go on and on and on for you. Yeah. So most of our water comes from the north, right?
For Westlands Water District.
Yeah, Westlands Water District comes from the north and everything. Yeah, I was looking at. So we had so much rain. Everybody thinks, well, the drought's over with, right? What's your opinion on that? It's not over with, is it?
No, it's not officially over yet. I think it was 9 storms that we had,
Yeah,
and I think it's there was obviously a lot of tragedy and loss of life, and so I want to be cognizant of that when I say
absolutely.
the rain is something that we need as a state. But I think what we've seen with climate change is how precipitation patterns have changed.
Hmm.
And so we used to rely quite heavily on the snowpack keeping our
Yeah,
snow cold.
yeah,
And so the water was stored there. That was nature's reservoir. Well, as we get rain and precipitation coming more in rain, well, it's not being stored in the snowpack, and so we're seeing these flood events, et cetera. And so we're hopeful if we can get a few more rain and it stays cold enough for the snow not to melt all at
right,
once.
right.
Because the snowpack, trying to again inject some optimism there, is over 200%.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because they take that in another month. I think they go up there, yeah, and then they stick it. You're right. So with the deal, and people don't understand that either, is okay. It rains a lot of water, but we have to have a cold rain for it to snow up in the mountains and provide a density of water.
Yep.
So the snow is denser, okay, and it's not like powdery fluff. It's like so they go up there and they take some readings and they figure it out, and then they tell you. Right.
Yes, and that's very important. And what you mentioned, because a lot of times we're caught up thinking, okay, well, how many feet? But it's really about snow water content.
Right.
And so it can be 10 feet deep, but very fluffy, and so
Right.
that could be a little misleading. So
Yeah. So it's 200. You heard it's 200%.
it's over 200%.
Yeah, because
average.
we've had a cold. See, and that's the other deal. Where's these storms come from? That matters a lot too. North is warm, the Gulf, or excuse me, south is the Gulf, so it's warm. North is cold. So we want a cold rain, like in the first 3 months. November, October, November, December, and then we want it to gradually get warmer. Right, the water, so it doesn't melt that. And when it melts it, what does it do? It then you have too much water, right? And that's why they're saying the need of more reservoirs and stuff. And I guess they're talking about that too and everything. But yeah, I found so many interesting things about this and the history of this and there's so many nuances about how much money has gone into this, who owns the infrastructure, who's maintained. Now, you maintain the infrastructure, right?
Our infrastructure, yeah.
Yeah. So you've got guys doing they call it operational maintenance. I call it preventive maintenance, what it's the same. But that's a cost and they say that's a pretty big cost. So there's you need a lot of that, I would assume. Is that correct?
Yeah, and so when we have drought and we have less water, a lot of those fixed costs don't go away, and so that's part of sort of a double whammy for our farmers is that whatever fixed costs are spread
Right.
over a lot less water.
Right.
And so when there's more water, there's more water to spread that over,
Yeah.
and so makes it a little easier.
Just so the money's, more water, more money. Is that right? Or
Well, when there's less water, like a situation right now, the price of the water that we have to
Sure.
buy because we're not getting any contract water
Right.
goes up. But in addition, we have to charge some of the fixed prices, fixed overhead for maintenance and for district staff personnel. All of
Yeah.
that stays the same. So you're spreading it over less water, less quantity, and so the price goes up.
so, yeah, because like last June 22, you got it was zero,
Yes.
right? So your contribution to the farm is zero. There's no surface water.
From the Central Valley Project.
Right, from the Central Valley Project. Where are they getting water from?
So
Pumping?
pumping.
Right.
Yes, that's
And that's
one.
expensive.
And
It drains the aquifer,
Mhm.
right? Well, I guess right now, from what I read, they're able to flood. Is that correct? Some land?
Yes, so other districts, it's not happening in Westlands, and so
Okay.
that's an important
That's
distinction
yeah, that's interesting.
because
Yeah.
it really depends on the soils and the crops and being able to flood. So in Westlands, a good portion of the district has a clay layer
Yeah.
called the Corcoran clay.
Yeah.
And so if you were to flood it, it's not going to percolate down into the lower aquifer because there's clay there. So we have a lower aquifer and an upper aquifer. Most of the pumping is happening from the lower aquifer because of the quality of the water of the upper aquifer.
Okay.
And in between those is a clay layer.
Okay.
And so when you have, if you were to flood, for example, or try to do a percolation basin, the water would just sit there on top of the clay.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It would take
See,
a
I
really
didn't know
long
that.
time.
Yeah.
And so there are some areas, depending on the soil, that the water just, like sand, would go all the way
Right.
down.
Right.
And so its recharge is more effective. Here, it would just stay in the root zone and probably, affect plants.
And that's primarily the entire valley, or just Westlands as you know it,
That's mostly Westlands. There are some areas in Westlands where,
which is huge, by the way.
Just
Yeah. Yeah.
but it depends. It varies. The soil can vary quite drastically depending on where you are.
So there's an upper aquifer and a lower aquifer and clay in between. So do you know how deep the aquifers are?
I know we have that in our Sigma report,
Yeah.
but I think we're drilling over 1,000 feet right
Yeah,
now.
that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was, I'd guess 1,000 feet. So is that where the water mainly comes from, is the secondary aquifer?
From the lower aquifer.
Right, right. And that's expensive.
There are some wells in the upper aquifer. However, most people that are drilling wells are drilling into the lower aquifer.
Right. And that's substantially through your whole district. That type of see, I didn't know that. I thought there was just one.
So the interesting part about Westlands,
Mm.
and you might have heard other areas having 2 or 3 groundwater sustainability agencies cooperating on one basin.
Yeah.
So we are, because of the size and kind of how the footprint matches,
Right.
the footprint of the West Side Subbasin is pretty much Westlands. And so we are the GSA for the entire West Side Subbasin.
Right.
It's not perfect, but that's sort of how it goes. So there are other subbasins that have 2 or 3 different districts or 2 or 3 different groundwater sustainability
Right.
agencies. And so we have, I guess, the privilege of managing one entire subbasin.
Well, that's a lot better, right? There's only one agency involved. There's not the headaches of people saying this and people saying that and debates and time and everything. And that's not affordable, So, yeah, that's a good thing. So this has been the Westlands it looks like it's been a big ongoing project and it never stops. Is that right?
Water has been at the heart of California
Yeah.
since inception. When I was reading and doing some research, I think if I'm accurate with what I was reading, like one of the first acts that California as a state, that legislature as a state did was around water.
Right.
Because even back then, people recognized how important water was to the future and the development of California and how it still is. We need the infrastructure just like we did then, and we need to invest just like we did then, and balancing all the beneficial uses of water, including farming.
Yeah. Yeah. People, there's Saline Aqueduct. There's all kind of things. I mean, the San Luis Obispo, I remember when I was a kid, because we always used to go to Santa Cruz when I was a little kid. And they finished around 1968 because I remember I was like 8 years old because we'd go through Pacheco Pass and I'd be able to see O'Neill's and that. And I remember they dug that thing deep. So I checked. And right now they're like at 470 feet or something like that. And they let out a lot of water. So there's a lot of water that's in the reservoirs right now, which is a good thing. And the bad thing is if it melts too quick, they got to let it out because they can't. Yeah. And that's the debatable issues. Do we need more places to store water? I think we do, and a lot of this has to do with population density too, as you know. People, they're the ones who use water. And it was like the average person household was like 300 gallons. And in 1982, from what it looks like, they made they started making the amendments and everything, and they didn't figure that from 1982 from now that there was going to be, it was like Section 215. They didn't understand that there was going to be 15 million more people here from 1982 when they did this. It's like, that's a lot of water. 15 million people at 300 gallons a day per household. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, from when the projects were built to now, the state of California has doubled in population.
Yeah.
And just alluding to one of the points that you were making as to where, it rains and there's more precipitation in Northern California.
Sure.
But the population is mostly, in the southern part of the state.
Yeah.
Vast majority.
Absolutely.
And so we've always had to transport, we've always had to engineer to get the water to where the people are.
Yeah.
And that's been, one of the challenges of California is how do we distribute the water resources, limited as they are, and use them in the most efficient way for the maximum benefit.
Well, that was like Casterson and our part of the valley is we pull everything from the north, right? Basically, and that's how we fill our coffers and everything. So, yeah, when I lived up in the Bay Area and I lived north of San Francisco, and it was raining it rained like 6 feet one year.
Wow.
Yeah, they told us not to don't go to work. The highway patrol, and I was like, this is, because I moved there from Fresno, I'm like, this is unbelievable. And I think it was the first year I moved up there, and they had so much water. And then I'd call my buddies down here and I'd say, yeah, I can't even go outside. It's raining. So, and they're like, it's not raining here. So, yeah, we get it's all the snow melt, too, from Shasta and all the big reservoirs, Tahoe and all that stuff. And it all runs in various canals and serviceways and everything. But, it meets, it's not meeting the requirements now because I think of the population draw and like we talked about, the water shortages that we've been having that drains the coffers and everything. I don't know what's going to happen, but they're going to, like you said, be optimistic. They're dumping a lot of money into the reclamation and infrastructure. So that'd be you, right?
And we're definitely trying to pursue those grants. There's millions and millions of dollars worth of repairs and infrastructure upgrades that need to be done. In addition to figuring out how do we recharge our groundwater, how do we store more water when we do get these massive rain events? How do we make sure that we're again utilizing every drop with how we get it now? As things change and adapt.
So do you have to see you're looking at it and as a footprint and you're going, well, okay, so this needs to be maintained. So you have to write a grant for everything or separately? Is that how it goes?
Well, you have to figure out how you're going to finance it.
Right.
And so that's one of the different ways is if there's money available, we'll write grants and try to utilize that money.
Yeah, because they were talking about $100,000 for one job and the maximum, and I was like, 100,000 to 200,000. That you can't do anything with that. That's nothing. So how many? You're going to have to apply for 10 jobs and one job to make the amount. $1 million doesn't go very far.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't know how it's going to shake out, or you've got a big job.
It's definitely a massive investment, but it also correlates to the importance of water. It's the lifeblood of every human being. Every animal needs water, and every crop needs water.
Yeah.
And ultimately, we need water to drink, and we need water to bathe, and we need water for our regular use. But we also need to remember that we also like to eat. And, if we're not growing our own food, where's that food coming from?
Right.
And how, I'll just take us back a little bit to COVID, and we
Yeah.
all saw
Yeah. How did that go?
our agricultural workers, our farm workers were essential workers.
Right.
Because, again, everybody recognizes the importance of being able to have your food on your table, and how privileged we are that here in Fresno, at least, or here in the Central Valley, we get some of the freshest produce
Right.
because it's right there.
Sure.
Just on a personal note, I've lived in Canada, I've lived in some other places,
Uh-huh.
and the variety that you see in the grocery store here is not, you can't compare it to other places. Here we're used to being able to find fresh produce, and over there in other places that aren't so lucky that they can't grow food all year round,
Right.
that kind of thing. The variety and the prices go up. And so I think we've been very privileged to be able to grow a lot of our own food, have world-class soils, Mediterranean climate, that it's not one of those things where, okay, we don't have water, we just need to shut it down.
Right.
We would be in a world of hurt, and so would the rest of the United States.
Right. Yeah. It's a big. So you could see the difference between Canada and here in the store. When you really.
Yep.
Yeah. The price or quality. Probably both.
It's both.
Yeah.
Because you have to transport it during the winter months. I mean,
Yeah,
you're talking about transporting long distance. And
Yeah.
so my grandma had a garden. I lived in the middle of a potato field, and
Yeah, a lot of potatoes. Yeah.
a lot of potatoes.
Yeah.
And you just had to wait until the ground thawed, and then once you started, there's challenges everywhere, but some challenges you don't have to face here. You
Yeah.
don't have to wait for the ground to not be frozen.
No, that's the deal with California. It's a semi-arid desert, which means it gets really, really hot, and you got good soil, so you're good and plenty, and that's what they did. These 5-generation forefathers of ours, these people we mentioned, Harris and Diener and all these guys, they knew what they were doing, and they did a good job. So, but things were easier then. They weren't as complicated. Well, they were, but you could get around things, and things got done a lot faster. Because I don't think you could do a Central Valley project right now with all the complications. I really don't.
It is difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. There's too many people with their hands in it and everything. Now we're talking about COVID. When that hit, the first thing I thought about was, everyone thought it was going to be really, really bad when it first hit. And my first thought was, well, you need to keep the water going, and you need to keep the electricity. How are we going to do that? Our infrastructure. So you were part of the water. That must have been pretty hectic.
Well, actually, it's interesting because our water infrastructure and our hydroelectric infrastructure, there's a relationship there. And so when there isn't enough water to going through the turbines, we're producing less electricity as
Right.
well. And
So do you sell electricity?
no.
Okay. Is it sold to you?
Yeah.
Yeah. The electricity is sold to you. Yeah, that's interesting. What do you do with the money? It goes back into the system? Is that how it's?
So the pumping and all of that, the electricity required for pumping and all
Right.
of that goes into the rates that our users are paying for the water.
Oh, yeah, okay, I got you. So, yeah, that's absorbed by the cost of the water then. Yeah, that means when you have water, the price is less because the price of electricity. Yeah, there's some big turbines and stuff to pump and everything. God, I think that's up by the lake too, out of Folsom or something. There's some big turbines out of there. Do you got? I think they run through you, but they're big. Yeah, I've seen them up there. It's pretty interesting. Yeah, well, with the COVID thing, so everything you have to do operational maintenance, right? And you had to do that through the COVID thing. So did you lose people and you had to move people around?
We had to abide by the COVID protocols, just like everyone else. Of
Yeah.
course, certain industries were considered essential workers.
Which was you.
Which was
Yeah.
not me
No, I
per
mean,
se, but
yeah.
yes,
Yeah,
yes,
Westlands
our
Water District. Sure.
construction crews and
Yeah, that's interesting. And, well, you were probably working a lot then, on the phone maybe.
well, actually, I just joined the district a little over a year ago,
Oh,
so
is that right?
right at the tail end. Yes.
Oh, is that right?
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
We're already back in person in the office and everything.
Good, good, good. Yeah, because I was reading about that and it said no masks or, and all that. So it's a lot better. Well, they lifted the requirements and everything. So, yeah, so you got a lot of people. You have to be highly organized.
On a personal level,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, but on an organizational level as well, yes.
Yeah, I mean, your
There's-
phone rings off the hook, I would imagine, with people calling and asking you questions, right?
Sometimes, yeah. It
Yeah,
gets
it's all
busier.
right.
Whenever there's something, a rain event or whatever else, people tend to call and ask, kind of like you mentioned, what does this do to affect the drought? Is this going to help our farmers? What kind of effects is this going to have on food prices, for example? So there's a lot of interest.
Well, they have to guess. Everything's a guess.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, and I mean, the guessing could start, and it's not like a 5-year plan you can make, right?
Nope.
Yeah, it's changing all the time. Seasons, I would imagine, and yeah, how much fertilizer am I going to have to use? How much pumping am I going to have to use? What's my cost going to be? What can I sell this for? It's hectic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the water agencies are right in the middle of everything. So.
Yes.
Now, do you have a lot of outreach programs? How does that go?
Yeah, so under the public affairs, we do quite a bit of outreach. So we do food distributions.
You do?
Mhm.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes.
Yeah.
In Cantua Creek, the El Porvenir Cantua Creek area, which is an unincorporated disadvantaged community in the district. We also do one in Huron, the city of Huron. We also have a scholarship program that's pretty robust for the students that are graduating high school and pursuing higher education.
Is that right? Yeah. So you're involved in. Are you involved in Fresno State? I would imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, we try to cultivate partnerships with all the educational institutions and with just anybody who has an interest in learning more about water, ag. It's interesting because I can't underscore enough what a valuable resource we have right in our
Sure.
backyard.
Yeah.
And how people from other countries come to learn from us how to do water conservation,
Yeah.
how to do farming. And so being able to partner, like last semester, I had 2 Fresno State interns, and being able to provide opportunities to our local youth who, are staying here or wanting to stay here, and making sure that we capture that talent.
So what do they do? You assign them to people? How does that go?
So for these were communications
Yeah.
interns. So it was just a lot of learning of how do you message certain things, how do you talk to people about certain things.
Oh,
The water situation being as complicated as it is, how do you distill it down to where it matters to, the common person?
yeah, the end user.
How do they associate, water availability with the food on their grocery shelves and the price, and how all that gets to you? It's the difference between you're having, California grown tomato or a tomato grown elsewhere,
Yeah.
in another country perhaps, and just that education on just the nutritional value of having it grown locally,
Right.
and this product safety and all the other stuff. So
Yeah, back in, I think it was around, I think there was a drought. It was in early 90s, maybe late 80s. A gentleman from Yugoslavia came, and he was my age, and they didn't know what to do with him. So they said, "Hey, Pat, you take this guy out and show him what's going on. He's interested." He was an engineer from Yugoslavia, come down here to see what's going on, how things work. I took him out to the west side. He couldn't believe that cotton came out of the ground. Yeah, because he was like, "What's that? What's that?" And I was going, "Oh, those are vines. Oh, those are trees. That's nuts." And this, and he says, "Where are you taking me?" I said, "I'm taking you to the cotton, growing where they gin it and everything, and pack it." And he was like, the cotton comes out of the ground? I said, oh, yeah. So I took them out. There's not a lot of cotton now. There used to be a lot more, out in Kesterson and everything, your area out there. There was a lot of, but it's mainly medical. It used to be clothing. Now it's tree food, nuts, and everything. They've gone to other sources. Again, they have to change sources too. So that there's another part of their confusion. How much does my crop? How much water is it going to use?
Right.
So that's a part of it. But yeah, what you do a really good thing. That's very complicated. I mean, it is complicated. There's so many districts involved. I was reading. I mean, I've got pages of things that I've read, and I can geek out on it, but like there's like 700 families.
Yeah, we say there's over 700 family farms.
Yeah.
So they may be constituted as an LLC or a corporation.
Sure.
But truly, in the West Side, they're family farms.
Right.
You mentioned some from the very beginning that are still farming to
Yeah,
this day.
all those people. Yeah.
Generations and generations. People introduce themselves. I'm so and so, a fifth generation farmer. I'm so and so, a third generation farmer. As they wear it as a badge of pride.
Sure.
And it's one of the wonderful things about the West Side is just this community of people that have been working and living together side by side for many generations, and the shared understanding.
Yeah. It's amazing how many they love to do it, and that's the only way you're going to do something that's this complicated. I mean, water. There's fertilizer. There's pruning. There's pests, there's all kind of issues. And you really have to love it to go through that pain every year, which is, there's pain. So feeding America is what we do here. We feed a big part of it. And, our water, and resources and everything, is a big part of it. But yeah, you're right. I couldn't believe how many people we have that come here from other countries, like you were saying, to see what we do. It's like big, to me, it's, hey, this is old stuff, but to them, it's, wow, we don't see this, here. And we have a lot of equipment innovation and everything, and things are changing all the time. It's high tech now,
Right.
farming. And there's a lot of high tech in water use,
Yep.
So your programs, it looked like you help people with water irrigation too, injection systems and everything.
Yeah, so water on the West Side has always been a scarce commodity. It's always been something that our farmers have, invested in making sure that they're maximizing the use of every drop. Over 90%, I think it's closer to over 95% of the irrigation that actually happens is efficient.
Yeah.
And so it's going directly drop by drop to the plant without being wasted.
Yeah.
And so we've been efficient before efficient was cool. We were monitoring our groundwater levels before it was required.
Yeah.
And so now with Sigma, of course, we're well into implementation now with that.
Yeah,
as
you're
well.
monitoring. Do you monitor pumps?
Mhm.
Yeah.
The wells, yeah.
Yeah, the wells too. Yeah, that was another issue. There's so much involved in doing this, where you're watching, how much people are taking out of the ground to how much they're getting on surface and everything. And when they get zero, it's not your fault that it didn't rain, right?
It didn't snow.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. It didn't snow, right? Yeah, it's not your fault. But yeah, like you said, I don't think it's ever been right where it's just okay all the time.
Well, actually, for many years, and there's usually when I do a presentation, I show a graph. For many years, the system worked, and Westlands got 100% allocation, just as it was intended to.
Right.
I think it was designed, and we talked about some of this, for a capacity of users and for different things.
Yeah.
And the situation changed. We had a climate change. We have additional regulations and additional laws that were passed. And so the system worked as designed and pretty well for a couple decades. It's just as conditions change, the investments in the infrastructure didn't change with it.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big thing. Yeah, like I said, people don't understand wars matter, and we spend a lot. We spend $1 trillion here, and it's like, hey, you could spend $1 trillion and redo all these water catchers and everything, but like I said, the Shasta deal stopped because of the war and everything, and we've been having constant that. And wars matter. People have to understand that all that money gets allocated somewhere, and it's not here where it should be. Right? Like you said, it's the lifeblood of the world. So you better do something quick about it. Yeah, I was amazed at how many family farms there were.
Mhm.
It's immense.
Yep.
It hasn't. It looks like it hasn't changed that much too.
In some respects, I mean, we've taken additional land out of production over the
Yeah,
years.
yeah.
So that's definitely changed things.
Yeah.
The land in and of itself has also gotten more productive.
Right.
So farmers have been able to do more with less.
Right.
And and I think that's something that people, what it takes to get that food on your table isn't
Yeah.
really understood.
Yeah.
You were talking a little bit about all the different things that farmers have to do. But what I also find fascinating is the timeline of decisions. They have to make decisions on what to plant, what acres to use, all of that, before actually knowing what water they're going to have, if any. And so they're making all kinds of business decisions with a lot of risk involved before knowing if it's going to rain, snow, how much water they're going to get. They're having to order water and make very substantial decisions that affect the bottom line. And many years, farmers are balancing, a couple years where they guessed right or they thought right, and a couple years where they didn't and they lost some money.
All right.
They don't know the price of their crop. They don't know the price of their input.
Right.
So they don't know how much they're going to sell it for and how much it's going to cost to get there.
Yeah.
Let alone the labor market, which sometimes fluctuates quite a bit
Right.
because if we're fallowing land, people are moving. And that's another really important thing I want to touch upon is
Sure.
that our communities, especially our West Side communities, they're largely dependent on agriculture.
Right.
Westlands in and of itself supports 35,000 jobs. Just the Westlands, not all of Fresno County ag, not any, just Westlands Water District.
35,000.
35,000.
Okay. How is that? Yeah. Now, how is that 35,000? What's the demographics on that?
So it's more so based on like an economic activity.
Sure.
It's not looking at anybody's payroll or anything.
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
It's an economic study. But essentially, it's not just the direct on the farm jobs in Westlands, because those are substantial as well. But it's also, the tractor supply company.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
also the insurance provider. It's also the real estate agent and all those other people. And so what we saw in the last drought, which is one of the reasons that really motivated me to come
Yeah.
and work in this issue, is, there was a lot of momentum. There was a lot of people talking about the devastation. We saw record high unemployment rates. We saw people leave. Our schools were suffering. We saw other kinds of public health
Taxes.
issues. Yeah, so different cities had programs that they had to cut because they weren't getting the revenue, because they weren't getting, if someone doesn't have a job, they're not getting their hair cut.
Yeah.
And they're not buying things.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, a lot of families made the decision to move, in pursuit of work. And so, with the labor market being unpredictable and right now record low unemployment. And so that's another, and one of those other factors is you don't know if you're going to have the labor force or at what cost you're going to have the labor force to pick the thing that you planted.
Sure. Yeah. Automation's a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
So because then it takes out that labor force and makes things faster and cheaper and everything. So that's a big thing that's being really innovated that I'm really interested in, looking at right now is the automation, part of it and everything. But like you said, so just your district is 35,000 people that it supports.
Yep.
Wow.
35,000 jobs, yes.
Yeah, that's Yeah, and all that's trickle down economics. Where does all that money go? It goes into other things, and it just builds and builds. Like you said, there's probably a lot of school districts and everything out in your area that are in need. And geez, yeah. Well, like you said, just because the drought, people think the drought's over because it's raining, and it's not. Or I call it water shortages, but it's not. So we got to figure it out. And it's going to take, I think it's going to take more time and more money and more time and more money. And a lot of thought process and a lot of support from our public and everything. But yeah, Fresno's always been, well, I mean, everybody here is in agriculture one way or another. Everybody is. So you got to figure, where does all the money go? And all these billions of dollars, we do billions. And I think it's 8 billion and well, where does all that go? Well, it goes in everything. It's not, these farmers aren't making $8 billion. So it's going into our school districts, our job market, our, like you said, our machine market, our fertilizer market, our bee markets. It just goes on and on and on. And people don't understand, and hopefully with the population growth, that's a big deal, I don't think it was understandable as, well, the population takes water, and that's less. Like they said, it was like 50-50-10, or no, 50-40-10, and with water with the farmers getting 40% of water, but that 40% has gone into that 50%, and that because of people, and that 50% is grown, so they've been taken out of Peter to pay Paul. It doesn't work because Peter's going to go broke. He's going to run out of water. So, that's another big thing that we have to look at and do something about quickly.
Well, what people need in addition to water is food.
I know what?
Is food.
Oh, yeah.
And so growing our food, raising our cattle, raising, anything that we eat is also going to require water.
Right.
And so that's why there's urgency. I mean, those are the two things: air, water, food.
Yeah.
Those are essential things that people need to survive.
Well, water and farming build cities. Cities don't build water and farming. So these big cities, they have to understand, they don't get it. It's processed food and all this stuff, and nobody understands that somebody's growing your food and all this water issues and everything. And the LA, they're going to get hit hard pretty quick here, hopefully not, but they are, and again, they think, well, it's been raining a lot and everything. It's got to do that for a few years, right?
Yeah. It's just also a matter of national security, because I think, the thought, we don't grow oranges here, or, there used to be a lot of avocados grown in Southern California, and now not as much.
Yeah.
Right? So we'll just import them.
Yeah. See? Yeah.
But what happens when there is a supply chain disruption?
Right.
How okay are you going to be without avocados?
Right. I agree.
With the price being sky high.
Yeah, I agree.
That's just an example.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. It's like, so what? We'll just import. No, that's another problem. What happens if they have a war or a disease or famine or this or that? There's 100 things that can happen, or they have a drought, a lot of other things that affect us or the snowfalls in other states that people don't understand either. It's like, well, this jet stream deal and the way the water flow, it's got to hit Colorado, and Colorado can't be in a drought, and this state can't be in, because it all flows in to one dam and reservoirs, and then it gets split all up. And if you don't have water and rain and snow in proper states that are far away, we got issues, because, we're a semi-arid, we're arid desert, you know.
So we like to say it's the Mediterranean climate.
Yeah.
And because you can't, that's why we say you can't just pick up, that piece of land and move it
No.
to another place,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I like to say the same thing.
Because that climate is 1 in 5 regions of the world.
Yeah.
And so it's not replicable. You can't just move the almond trees or the pistachio trees
Right.
somewhere else.
Right.
Demand for almond milk, over the years has gone up.
Oh,
Demand
yeah.
for almonds has gone up. And so that's, function of supply and demand. But there's only a few places in the world that you can grow certain crops successfully.
Right.
And yields are pretty high in the district too because of the combination of climate and everything else. So what you'd be getting would be retiring some of the most fertile ag land and replacing that production with probably more acres somewhere else, more water somewhere else, and maybe actually less production.
Right. Yeah.
So it's an irreplaceable commodity, and the more you learn, or the more I've learned, the more there's this sense of trying to preserve what we have,
Right.
acknowledge, value, and preserve what's there. Obviously, try to obviously constantly improve, constantly look at how we can make things better, how we can improve our communities, how we can, as a system, all work together to make things better. But we just all have to be rowing in the same boat.
Yeah. Yeah. Everybody's got to get on the same page. And politically, that's real tough with the state and the federal government and all these separate entities and everything. And they've all got to work together. And we better do it. That's all I have to. Is there anything else you'd like to express or say or anything?
No, I appreciate the opportunity to just raise awareness. I would ask that your listeners, if they're going to take anything from this, is to just think a little bit about where their water and their food comes from.
Yeah.
Just a little digging will, I think, raise your awareness as to what the situation is that we're living in California or even the Western United States.
Yeah.
Where does your water come from? Is it from a river? Is it from the ground? How is it? All the stuff that goes into it, I think, makes for a deeper level of appreciation.
Yeah. Well, it's the spigot, and you're washing your car and stuff. And I've always conserved, so because I understand, but you can't let that water go. Anyway, I appreciate it. I'll include your website and your name and all that good stuff in the description and everything. I appreciate you coming in, Elizabeth.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, I had a nice talk with you.
Appreciate
Talk
it.
to you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.